The time is at hand.
From the land between the crackheads in Williamson, West Virginia, you're in Dark Places. My name is Jumbo Fugit. Welcome. Got a fun little show for you this week. I'm not sure where you're listening from, but you may want to take an umbrella with you on May 10th and 11th. 53 years ago, the Soviet Union launched a probe to Venus, Cosmos 482. However, it failed leaving the Earth's orbit, and the 1 meter, half a ton probe will crash into Earth, likely around May 10th or 11th. Because it was built to withstand the pressure and temperature of Venus, it will survive falling through our atmosphere. Prediction of its precise impact is very difficult, and it may be worked out minutes or hours before crashing. However, anywhere within 52 degrees north to south is within the impact zone. The likelihood is it will crash into one of the oceans. However, before it does so, if it occurs at night, it will appear as a bright, slow-moving shooting star. So yeah, heads up. Right this very minute, as you're hearing this, I am on my way on a little business trip with my buddy Roger. And I'm just going to put out a little short and sweet episode right now. Sorry about that. This is Haunted West Virginia. The West Virginia ghost story that will leave you absolutely baffled. A ghostly bride haunts 5th Street Road in Huntington, appearing to drivers and mysteriously vanishing at the bottom of the hill. Written by Jeff Foster. Thanks, Jeff. At their core, ghost stories are mysterious. Apparitions do not sit down with you and tell you their story. They slip into the living world, insubstantial and mute, leaving witnesses to scrape together an identity based on almost nothing. Sometimes their secrets are discovered, sometimes not. Some lost souls will always be lost. This ghost story takes place in Huntington, West Virginia. About an hour and a half from me. Spent many days in Huntington. Went to college there. Paid off big time. I work in a grocery store. End of rant. The River City is no stranger to hauntings, but this story does not take place in a house or some abandoned old building. The place that is haunted is a road. Specifically, 5th Street Road. This road starts out in a local neighborhood before crossing a bridge and going up a hill. It is at the top of the hill that this apparition is generally found. The first appearance of this ghost was reported in October of 1942. A cab driver was driving along the road at 4 a.m. When he crested the hill, he saw a young woman on the side of the road, waving him down. He pulled over and let her in. Even though it was cold, she was only wearing a thin blouse and a skirt. When he remarked that it must be cold without a coat, she said that she hadn't worn a coat for 9 or 10 years. She asked the driver to take her to the bottom of the hill, so he drove down the hill, and when he got to the bottom, the girl in the back seat was gone. He checked the floor, thinking that maybe she had fainted and fallen out of the seat, but she was not there. He checked the road, and it was deserted. When he returned to the station, he told the dispatcher what occurred and found out that the same thing happened to a driver of another Huntington cab company a year earlier. In years that followed, many other people reported the same experience on that hill in its most common form. As reported in a 1958 newspaper article, the young woman is wearing a bridal gown and is only seen on rainy nights. She rarely speaks, but she will also accept a ride and disappear when a driver reaches the stoplight at the bottom of the hill. At some point, the girl's origin was revealed. The story goes that she was coming back from her wedding in Wayne when it started to rain, making the roads slick. Somewhere on or near the hill, the car flipped and the bride was killed. Ever since, she can be seen on that hill in the early spring and only after dark when it's raining, hitching rides from passing motorists. A later story has a cab driver knocking on a door at a house at the bottom of the hill after the girl disappears from his cab, in the hope that the occupants might make sense of what happened. The woman who answers tells the man that the girl was her daughter and that she had died. However, this origin story has never been proven, and the girl appears in different time periods with different clothes. Sometimes a wedding dress, sometimes just a blouse. She has been witnessed hundreds of times over the years. Another story involves a cab driver who tried to ignore the girl as she flagged him down, but apparently she would not be ignored. When the driver tried to pass her by, the engine stopped, the lights went out, and the radio fell silent. When the girl got in the car, everything came back on again. Sometimes she has even accepted a ride on a bus, but regardless of the vehicle, she always vanishes at the bottom of the hill. So who is this disappearing girl that has been walking the roads of Huntington for 60 years? How has she been around for so long, yet is always appropriately dressed for the current era? The people who have seen her swear that she is real, and no report mentions her clothes being of a different time period. Whoever she is, her appearances are as baffling as her apparent ability to change with the times. Is it the same girl in every report, or different girls who have mysteriously been killed on a cursed road that always needs a spirit walking its shoulder, perpetually lost? It is highly doubtful that we will ever know the truth about the apparition who cab drivers call the Ghost Girl of 5th Street Road. To this day, the origin of the bride in the rain is still a mystery, and many years have passed since the last sighting. Maybe that means that her spirit is finally free. Perhaps she finally found her way home, and her long dark road has finally found its dawn. I drove on that road many a times on my way to college and back, and I never did see her. But it's that time of year. I should go there and check it out some rainy night. Pretty interesting. The story was sent in by our friend Theresa. I love a good Phantom Hitchhiker story. Being so close to Huntington, West Virginia, I'm partial to the Phantom Hitchhiker of 5th Street Hill story. But I found out a while back that my dad possibly tried to pick up Resurrection Mary. He grew up outside of Chicago, and one night, when he was about 13, he was with his older brothers out driving around in a rural area. He said they drove past this girl in white near a cemetery, and being young men, decided to stop and offer her a ride. But when they got out of the car to find her, she was nowhere to be found. I guess it's possible she ran off and hid, not wanting to deal with a car full of young men. But I like to think it was her. And thanks, Theresa. Check out Theresa's Haunted History on YouTube and Facebook. She's a longtime friend. She's got some good stuff going on. Thanks, Theresa. This story was sent in by my friend Steve. Steve works in a nursing home here, and he says, we have an alarm on all of our outside doors. That way, if someone's trying to get out, the alarm goes off. The alarm will not turn off until you push in a code. This happened on April 30th, just a couple of days ago. There's a place up here called Activities, since it's where they do all the activities throughout the day. But there's no one here at 5:30 in the morning. So I was getting my stuff ready, and I was outside. And when I came in, the nurse came in behind me, and she asked if I heard the alarm go off. I told her no, I had been outside. She said I went to go turn it off. It was in Activities, and I was coming through the window. When I got about halfway through the window, the alarm went off. There is no way that alarm would go back off on its own. The alarms will sound for hours, and it never resets itself. The only way you can reset it is with a code. I don't know if it was a ghost, but I don't know what else it would have been. Thanks, Steve. Steve's got some crazy experiences. And me and Steve also go back a long way now. Years fly by. And he's one of my favorite people in the whole world. He's a good guy. The Lost Soul of Loveberry Ridge Church, St. Bernard Catholic Church in Lewis County, West Virginia. The wood-sided church sits on a hill on a one-lane road miles from the nearest town. The tree-lined road is quiet, and family homes speckle the trip up to the 1910 church. The well-cared-for church and cemetery were once the center of Catholic life in Lewis County, West Virginia, with many of the parishioners being immigrants from Ireland who brought with them their Catholic faith and traditions. These include the sad tradition of not allowing the bodies of the damned to be buried inside church cemeteries. The story of John Kennedy and his unusual burial is the reason so many have thought over the years that this church and cemetery are haunted. Construction on the single-room church finished and services began in 1910. Yet many of the graves in the cemetery are from the late 1800s. The graves are remnants of earlier churchyards. This structure is actually the third version of the church, the first being recorded back to a log Catholic church that was active in the 1850s. All the churches have looked down over Lovebury Ridge as a beacon on the hill to those looking for a place to worship. Many churches and cemeteries in the Mountain State are on the tops of hills or mountains, no matter what the denomination. West Virginia people held the belief that you were closer to God when you worshipped/spent eternity on a mountaintop. The other more practical reason to have a cemetery on a hilltop is flooding. West Virginia is prone to flash flooding and has a wet climate, making bottomland swampy and full of bogs if not well drained. So in the 1800s, a wise choice was to place the wooden coffins in higher locations, where they would not float to the top of the ground during a flood or bob up to the surface if a freshwater spring started under the cemetery. In the cemetery, there is a tombstone that is not in line with the others in the church cemetery. Up against the fence alone is the stone marking the gravesite of John Kennedy. The stone is so close to the fence that an adult cannot pass between it and the fence. On the ground in front of the headstone is his footstone, with just the JK marking. This is a strange placement for a footstone during Victorian times. It would have been placed several feet below the head of the dead. It is this grave that started the stories of the haunting at the church. As was custom of the 1800s Catholic Church, any person who committed a mortal sin was unable to have a funeral mass or burial in the church cemetery. John Kennedy committed suicide at the young age of 19, making it impossible for his remains to stay in St. Bernard's Cemetery. John's other family members are buried in a cemetery and were people of wealth and power, making it possible for John to have the large marker within the fence of St. Bernard's, but not his body. The remains are in a small bank along the road, outside the fence, leaving John to forever struggle with the fact that his bones are outside of the sacred ground of the church and without the holy blessing of the priest. Some say that John roams the road and parking lot, that he is always looking for a way back into the good graces of the church and his family. First-hand sightings have said that the front and back gates of Church Hill will open and close on their own, even though both gates into the property have latches. That a black shadow figure moves around the parking lot area and up and down the road to the church at certain times of the year, that the church windows glow at night as if by candlelight, as if someone is trying to look out of the church into the cemetery. It is interesting to note that the remains of the rectory are still visible across the road where Father Thomas A. Quirk oversaw the building of this church and lived most of his life. The rectory's well, cellar, and stone path are still visible to anyone who would want to walk up the steep bank to see them. Property is protected with a large wooden cross that stands on the foot of the bank, where the main house and offices would have stood. This may be why the ghost is only seen in the road. It is also possible that the strange happenings at, inside, and out the church could be caused by the ongoing conflict between the longtime resident Father Thomas Quirk and the young man John Kennedy. Father Quirk passed in 1937 after serving his parish for over 39 years, passing at the age of 92. His resting place in the cemetery has a large white sculpture of Calvary with a monolithic gray granite stone slab, where his remains rest only feet from the stone marker of John Kennedy. Locals believe that Monsignor Quirk is the spirit still protecting the church and its revival Gothic interior. Monsignor's ghost will not allow anyone who enters the church to remove anything that belongs to his church. The story goes that nothing from hymnals to Bibles can be removed from the church by anyone who is not approved by the watchful ghost. Many stories state that if a person attempts to remove the altar Bible from the church, the book gains weight as the uninvited guest progresses down the aisle of the church. Finally, the book becomes too heavy to carry and drops to the floor, where it is impossible to be moved. In the last few years, the caretakers of the church have also added the watchful eyes of security cameras to prevent unwanted intruders from entering the church. The church is officially closed nowadays. No services are regularly held, but the church remains part of Catholic life in Lewis County. Some summers, the church is open when they choose to have homecoming events and weddings at the remote location. And I think I should head to Lewis County one day. And that's about all of the big show this week. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again right here next week. God bless.